Mary Tillotson is on Capitol Hill with more. Mary, what's the mood up there today?
I think some caution. As you said, the votes were close 5 days ago when Congress voted to give Mr. Bush the green light for this use of military force in the Persian Gulf. In all, 230 members of the House and Senate voted against war and in favor of sanctions to push Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. But now the shooting is started. It is expected that the leaders in the Senate early today, when the Senate comes into session, will introduce a resolution that would put Congress on record as fully supporting both the president and allied troops in the Persian Gulf. And I would not be surprised if a vote in favor of that resolution were unanimous or very close to it. Still one more invitation to Saddam Hussein to withdraw from Kuwait, now that he has had a taste of the Allied air power arrayed against him. Washington, like other Allied capital cities, is encouraged by the apparent success of those early airstrikes, but House Armed Services Committee Chairman Les Aspin sounded a cautionary note in the early hours of this war.
If the air forces do it well, then the ground forces that they face will be pretty well decimated with the air attack, and then the ground forces don't face such a severe problem. So, you know, it's not a question. I mean, even if the air forces don't do it entirely themselves, they may do 90% of it or 80% of it, in which case then the ground force operation would be fairly simple. But I would be very surprised. I'm still skeptical. I mean, put me down as skeptical. I think that you're going to need a ground attack, that this thing is going to be weeks, not days, that we're still going to need, we're going to have some casualties here. In other words, don't let this optimism here don't let it carry you away.
Every member of Congress who has had anything to say about the war since the first bomb started falling last night has promised that Congress will vote for whatever funds are necessary to provide whatever weaponry and support are necessary to the Allied troops in the Persian Gulf. But I think it is a quite distinct question as to whether the current public and congressional enthusiasm for the war remains high if the casualties become high, and if the war drags on for weeks or perhaps even months. And as Aspin was saying, it's much too early to know that yet. Mary Tillotson, CNN Live on Capitol Hill.
Mary, can you put a date on this? The general feeling now from Congress seems to be rally around the president. But as you point out, for how long?
I think the general feeling is rallying around those young men and women whose lives are on the line in the Persian Gulf. And I think as far as funding is concerned, that will continue just as it did for years in Vietnam. I think the question really is less congressional support than what happens among the public, the people whose children are out there. And I can't put a date on it. I think it is everyone's fervent hope and the countries involved in this that it will be short and quick and casualties on both sides will be low. But I think, as Aspin was saying, it's much, much too early to know whether that will unfold.
All right, thanks, Mary. Mary Tillotson reporting live from Capitol Hill this morning. Molly?
It's about 14 minutes before 3 in the afternoon in Baghdad, Iraq. CNN's Peter Arnett remains in the El Rashid Hotel in Baghdad. Peter, does the very violent status quo continue in the skies over Baghdad? CNN's Peter Arnett, are you able to hear me in Baghdad? Apparently not. Apparently not. We will try to reestablish our line of audio communication with CNN's Peter Arnett in Baghdad. Right now, we'll go to Candy Crowley. She's at the State Department. Candy?
Good morning. I guess one could say at this point that the terms war and diplomacy seem to be oxymorons, but a very real case can be made that without the diplomacy that took place prior to this war could not have taken place. Throughout the last 5 months, Secretary of State James Baker, in addition to trying to convince Saddam Hussein that he should pull out of Kuwait, has spent much of his time trying to get the coalition partners together. And indeed, they have stayed together, even as the first shots were fired. When we heard that from Baghdad, we, within hours, heard from the Prime Minister of Britain and also from the Soviet Foreign Minister, who were still up front and on board within hours of opening fire. One of the things that has happened here, or the only movement we have here today, is that Secretary of State James Baker will be over at the White House, this morning for breakfast with Defense Secretary Cheney and National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft. There will, of course, also be meetings with the president. But for right now, the action really is over in Saudi Arabia. Diplomacy, of course, always continues, but one could say that the time for diplomacy ran out at midnight on the 15th. Candy Crowley, CNN Live at the State Department.
All right, that's CNN's Candy Crowley live at the State Department this morning. We have managed to reestablish that very vital audio link to Baghdad. CNN's Peter Arnett is there. Peter, I asked you before, and I don't think you heard me, has the very violent status quo been continuing in the skies over Baghdad?
The battles are continuing. It's mid-afternoon here, exactly 12 hours since the first U.S. warplanes came to bomb Baghdad. They apparently caught the Iraqi air defenses by surprise. In fact, the alarm sirens didn't go off until 15 minutes after the first attack. Since then, there's been wave after wave of bomber attacks on military and government targets inside the city and industrial targets on the outskirts. The most recent raid was 40 minutes ago with the roar of warplanes sounding overhead, but they weren't visible to us because of the cloud cover. Anti-aircraft fire from the Baghdad air defenses has been powerful and constant, and the government is claiming that it has shot down 14 U.S. planes or multinational force planes. Jordan Radio is saying that 14 pilots are being captured. The impact of all these air raids, we can tell you that the Defense Ministry has been destroyed in Baghdad, as there's been a direct hit on the Socialist Ba'ath Party headquarters. That's President Saddam Hussein's party that runs the country. The telecommunications center has been hit amongst other targets. A CNN technician saw President Saddam Hussein at the Baghdad telecommunications center mid-morning. The Iraqi leader looked grim and resolute. He has broadcast a defiant statement declaring that that this is the mother of all battles, and the mother of all battles has indeed begun. Most of the civilian population has moved out of Baghdad to safer locations in the countryside. We've seen no panic in city streets, but the bombing raids apparently confined to military and industrial targets and well clear of the civilian community. Peter Arnett reporting live from Baghdad.
Peter, let's talk for a moment. Your descriptions of the bombing of Baghdad have been extremely vivid. What, though, are the chances of getting the video that you have of that bombing out of Baghdad and back to us here at CNN?
We've been trying all day to send the video by satellite. However, there's been a microwave station apparently hit in the bombing, which has put this transmission point out of operations. As we speak, one of our tapes is on the way to the Jordan border with a convoy of press who have decided to leave by land. They're leaving Baghdad as of now. It'll be a 10-hour drive to the Jordan border, and we'll have the first video, hopefully, when that convoy arrives in Amman. Molly?
Peter, I've heard you say this morning that you feel relatively safe in the Hotel El Rashid where you are, that you don't believe that the hotel is going to take any sort of a direct hit from Allied forces. What can you tell us about the well-being of you, our crew, the other journalists that are there?
Molly, when you made that comment to one of our CNN younger people here, said, well, you feel safe. They figure that I've seen so many wars, but I have been under bombing before. I've been under American bombing, in fact, in Hanoi in 1972. But my assessment is that this hotel is solid. None of the attacks that have been launched on the city in this locality have been nearer than maybe a mile away. This is a 14-story building. It's the highest landmark in the area, and I think if we stay in this hotel, we'll be safe. When we go out in the city, of course, if we are invited by the government at some point, maybe to visit the battlefield in the south, of course, there's an element of danger. In terms of the safety of the press corps in Baghdad, there are 45 journalists from many nations that are registered with the Ministry of Information. To our knowledge, they are all safe. They were all in the hotel during the most serious bombing early this morning. They have been out in the streets, and we've been sending messages back to their folks at home. But from what we can see, no one has been touched here, and we're all safe. Molly?
From what you hear out on the streets, is there any indication that Saddam Hussein will try any more communication with the people of Baghdad?
Well, Iraqi radio is making broadcasts. I think their communication system is in disarray, but I think that whenever they get back into operation, I think he'll be talking to his people. from the people we spoke to, there seems to be a lot of support out in the city for him. I mean, he has been a popular leader, certainly in the capital city of Iraq, it seems. Molly?
All right, Peter, this is Rick Moore. We've been getting some conflicting reports this morning about the possibility of ground forces in combat. What are you hearing there in Baghdad?
You know, Rick, we are in a little cocoon. We can report to you basically what we can see from this hotel. We're on the 9th floor. We can actually see a lot, but we can't look south of the border of Kuwait or Saudi Arabia, so we cannot help you in any way on any operations that may be happening beyond the horizon here, Rick.
All right, thanks, Peter. And we're going to take a break now. We'll be going back to Baghdad Live a little later, and we will also be looking back to when this war began, at almost 12 hours ago. If you'll stay with us, we'll have that report coming up next.
Flu season again. When the aches and pains, the fever and chills of the flu get you, it's important to know doctors are recommending Tylenol more than ever. 6 times more than aspirin for the flu. Doctors know there's more medicine in extra-strength Tylenol than regular aspirin. It's stronger relief for the aches and chills of the flu. Tylenol, the doctor's choice by 6 to 1, and the pain reliever hospitals use most.
No one can guarantee you a perfect world. A world where the unexpected never intrudes. But some of us know we'll be taken care of quickly and compassionately. In an imperfect world, you're in good hands with Allstate, a member of the Sears Financial Network.
These people never thought of themselves as high-pressure salespeople. They've always been committed to service. That's why they've become successful Better Homes and Gardens real estate agents, and why they use our proven real estate marketing systems to serve their customers better than anybody. After all, we found that once you place service above everything, everything else falls into place. For information about a career in real estate, call 1-800-ADVANCE or your local Better Homes and Gardens real estate firm.
The war in the Gulf. CNN is the network with the most complete coverage, from the inner sanctum of the Oval Office to strategic planning in the Pentagon, the banks of the Nile in Cairo, to the chambers of the Security Council, from the front lines of the Saudi desert to the streets of Baghdad, a city under siege. Latest developments in Israel and in Jordan caught in the middle. Now, more than ever, shouldn't you be watching the network viewers voted best in coverage of the crisis in the Gulf? CNN.
These are live pictures from Amman, Jordan, where it's almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a peaceful, beautiful day, but not so in other parts of the Mideast. Our coverage throughout the day will continue from Jordan, Egypt, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and other points around the world, including a Pentagon briefing from Washington at 9 this morning. Molly?
The drama during the first bombing wave of Baghdad was captured by the reporting of 3 CNN correspondents in Iraq's capital. CNN's Bernard Shaw, Peter Arnett, and John Holloman were in a hotel in Baghdad when U.S. warplanes roared through the sky. We bring you now an excerpt from those early moments of the war. CNN anchor David French was on the air last night when all eyes turned to Baghdad.
We have to go to Baghdad, Secretary. We're going to Bernard Shaw in Baghdad.
This is, something is happening outside. Peter Arnett, join me here. Let's describe to our viewers what we're seeing. The skies over Baghdad have been illuminated. We're seeing bright flashes going off all over the sky. Peter? Well, there's anti-aircraft gunfire going into the sky. We hear the sound of planes. They're coming over our hotel. However, we have not yet heard the sound of bombs landing, but there's tremendous lightning in the sky, lightning like a fix. Bernie? I have a sense, Peter, that people are shooting towards the sky, and they are not aware or cannot see what they're shooting at. This is extraordinary. The lights are still on. All the street lights in downtown Baghdad are still on. But as you look, you see trails of flashes of light going up into the air, obviously anti-aircraft fire. We're getting starbursts, seeming starbursts in the black sky. We have not heard any jet planes yet, Peter. No plane. Now the sirens are sounding for the first time. The Iraqis have informed us.
Well, we heard Peter Arnett saying the Iraqis have informed us, and then we didn't hear any more. This is probably just a technical glitch. They have 4 wires there that they can use, and those wires can be easily severed or pulled.
The first sights and sounds of war last night, and there were millions of people around the world listening and watching. We will continue updating the latest from the Persian Gulf War at the top of the hour, including live reports from our correspondents in Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and at the Pentagon, the State Department, and the White House.
And we will also continue to talk to our CNN correspondents in Baghdad. We plan to bring you analysis of the latest developments in live interviews with former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and former National Security Advisor Robert McFarlane. Stay with CNN.
Jack Patton, publisher of Business Week.
I'm proud that so many leading companies advertise in our pages. American Express, AT&T, General Motors. Business Week ad pages read like a who's who of business. Why do so many successful companies choose our pages to tell their stories? Because they're trying to reach people like you. People who are successful themselves, or well on their way to being there. Just look at the numbers. You see, I'm just as proud of our readers, too, because they help make Business Week the world's #1 business magazine. America's most successful business people read Business Week because it's simply the best source for objective reporting and thoughtful analysis of the week's business news, from international trade to personal finance. They get the full story in our pages every week. And that brings me to your subscription to Business Week. Whether you've already arrived or on the way up, you should subscribe to Business Week right now. You will be in excellent company.
Now is the time to subscribe to Business Week, because right now you can get 32 issues of Business Week for the low basic rate of $24.95, a savings of more than 60% off the $2 cover price. It's all the business news you need every week, the kind of value real success is built on. And with your paid subscription, Business Week will send you the compact data bank absolutely free. The data bank is more than a calculator. It also stores all your important phone numbers and even serves as an electronic appointment book. And remember, it's free with your paid subscription to Business Week. Here's how to subscribe.
Subscribe today and get all the week's business news delivered to your home or office for only 78 cents an issue. Just call 1-800-356-9700 and we'll send you 32 issues of Business Week for only $24.95. This low basic rate saves you more than $39 off the cover price, and your satisfaction is guaranteed. The data bank is free with your paid subscription. That number again is 1-800-356-9700. Call now.
This is CNN.
Good day to all CNN viewers. President Bush says things are going well in the war that U.S. and allied forces launched overnight to force Iraq out of Kuwait. The president paid a surprise visit to the White House press room about an hour and a half ago. Mr. Bush said things are going well exactly as you've all reported. British military sources say one of their Tornado fighter bombers has been lost in the bombing of Iraq. 4 French planes were hit by ground fire, but they all made it back safely to their bases. There is no official report on U.S. plane losses, but Pentagon officials indicate there are some. There are many rumors and unconfirmed reports from the war front. CNN's Charles Crawford has the latest on what is known and what is not.
The Pentagon will not comment on Kuwaiti radio reports that Allied forces are advancing toward the Kuwaiti border from positions in Saudi Arabia. Also unconfirmed, reports that a number of Iraqi tank troops in Kuwait have begun to surrender. What is known is the air assault on targets in Iraq continues. Allied warplanes in control of the sky scored direct hits on the Iraqi Defense Ministry in Baghdad. One wing of the building is reported completely destroyed. Another wing is on fire. Despite his official backing for the U.S.-led alliance, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev issued a downbeat response to the outbreak of war.
We express our deep sorrow that the military confrontation could not be averted. So I'm ready to emphasize one more time, we did everything possible to avert the conflict.
Iranian leader Hashemi Rafsanjani also expressed regrets. The official Iranian news agency quotes Rafsanjani as saying, "Iran did everything it could to prevent war." And the PLO says the events in the Gulf mark a black day for world history and is calling on Arab leaders to oppose what it calls the American-European Zionist alliance that attacked Iraq. Perhaps the most favorable response to Operation Desert Storm is coming from the top 4 U.S. oil companies. Mobil, Chevron, Unocal, and Conoco announced price freezes on gasoline shortly after the war began. Charles Crawford, CNN, reporting.
Iraqi President Saddam Hussein braved Allied bombing raids today to tour the streets of Baghdad. That's being reported on Baghdad radio. They say the president, who seldom appears in public, visited the Air Force and Air Defense headquarters, reported badly damaged in the U.S. that led the blitz that began during the night. Baghdad radio's report gave no account of damage, but the few Western correspondents able to report to the outside world say the Defense Ministry has been hit in the first wave of bombing. Earlier, the reclusive president was spotted by a CNN staffer at Baghdad television, looking grim and resolute. It's now a little after 3 o'clock in the afternoon in Baghdad. Peter Arnett has been doing our spotting from his vantage point at the hotel. Peter, what's it look like now?
The skies have been quiet for the last hour and a half. We've had breaks like this earlier in the day. They're usually broken by yet another wave of bombing. It was indeed 13 hours ago that the first planes came over this capital city of Iraq and started bombing. There was an enormous anti-aircraft fire resisting them. Targets were selected with surgical precision, the Pentagon says, and it seems like that to us here. Reporters have been out on the streets, say the Defense Ministry was hit with 3 bombs, has been mostly destroyed. One wing in flames, one wing collapsed, another tottering. Another target that we have verified that was hit was the President Saddam Hussein's Socialist Ba'ath Party headquarters. That's the party that runs the country. And the telecommunications center was hit. The oil refinery that we saw destroyed earlier in the morning from our hotel window is another on the casualty hit list, along with a chemical plant that is to the north of our location. We have been out in the streets of Baghdad, and interestingly enough, traffic is flowing. While there have been airstrikes during the day, they're mostly confined to the outskirts, and the population, which got inured to this bombing not of this extent, but used to the fact of war and the fact of Iranian rockets falling on them, they are out and about to some degree, and a few shops are open. Peter Arnett reporting live from Baghdad.
All right, Peter, thank you very much. We will be coming back to you throughout the morning, the afternoon, your time there in Baghdad. Now let's see if we can find out any more about what has or has not happened to the U.S. planes involved in the raids into Iraq last night. Gene Randall is standing live now at the Pentagon. Gene?
Good morning, Rick. We're still trying to determine if, in fact, American planes have been lost in the airstrikes against Iraq and Iraqi-occupied Kuwait. There is no evidence to support Baghdad's claim it shot down 14 attacking warplanes, but we have learned there may well have been some Allied losses. There is a British press report that the British lost a Tornado fighter bomber with a 2-man crew aboard. The plane was said to be taking part in the second wave of attacks against Iraq. The French Defense Ministry says 4 of its planes were hit by ground fire as they operated inside Kuwait. Those aircraft apparently got away safely. We are told Defense Secretary Dick Cheney and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Colin Powell, will brief us at 9 o'clock this morning Eastern Time, though sometime before that, there'll be a briefing by a Saudi general in Saudi Arabia. In the meantime, the word out of here is that the air war against Iraq is going very, very well. In the words of the Pentagon, largely according to plan. Gene Randall, CNN Live at the Defense Department.
Thank you, Gene. The U.S., Britain, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait participated in the initial airstrike against Iraq. U.S. pilots came back jubilant to Saudi Arabia. They said they encountered a few airplanes, but nothing that came close.
It looks a lot like, lights, flickering lights, like Christmas lights or something like that when the AAA's coming up. And then shortly after that, it looks like some big bomb fireworks or something like that going off. It was an awesome display. It truly was.
You sit there and you watch this stuff come up, and at some point you become comfortable almost with what you're doing because you're in your cockpit, and then you realize that this isn't the time to become comfortable with what you're doing because you've got stuff being aimed at you. And it kind of jogs you back into reality, and you go, that is aimed for me. I need to be looking out a little bit better. So it kind of brings you back into reality real quick.
We launched out, and we were all pumped right from the beginning. We had a lot of good adrenaline going. And we knew they were going for a reason. We weren't just a regular launch. We knew that they were going in there to get Iraq.
Defense Secretary Dick Cheney and General Colin Powell, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, will hold a news briefing today at the Pentagon at 9 a.m. Eastern. CNN does plan live coverage. We will also plan live coverage of a briefing in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia by the Department of Defense. That briefing is scheduled for 10 a.m. Eastern. Stay with us. Former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger still to be interviewed right here on CNN.
Wherever your business takes you, the Gulfstream 4 can take you there. The Gulfstream 4 can take you nearly 5,000 statute miles non-stop, equaling or exceeding airline timetables. Or it can take you to several locations in a single day, optimizing your time and energies. No other business aircraft gives you global access with such uncompromised timeliness, convenience, and security.
I have a horrible sinus headache. There's pounding, there's pressure, there's pain.
Today, Linda Clark is trying Tylenol Sinus.
Tylenol Sinus took away the pressure. It took away the pain. It took away the pounding. I like that it's a Tylenol product. I trust that name.
Tylenol Sinus, the strength you need from the name you trust. And now look for new Tylenol Sinus gel caps. Maximum strength, concentrated, and gelatin-coated so they're easy to swallow. Only from Tylenol, the first sinus gel cap.
Our projection screen looks so real, you'll feel like part of the show when you watch the new RCA home theater. It also has surround sound that's so real.
Stand back, everyone.
You'll forget you're sitting at home.
Let me handle this.
The RCA home theater also has Pix and Pix. It lets you watch two things at once, in color. Another way, RCA is changing entertainment again.
Ask any two people to describe the New Yorker, and chances are you won't hear the same word twice. For those who want the intellect stirred, there's Pulitzer Prize-winning fiction. For those who want wit, there's humor and satire. Plus the latest on music, art, dance, sports, and of course, the New Yorker's famous cartoons. Get 52 weekly issues of the New Yorker for just $25.95, 70% off the newsstand price, and get this brand new cartoon collection free with your paid subscription. Call 1-800-257-1257.
Joining us now to assess where we are, where we have been, and where we might be going in Operation Desert Storm, former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. Mr. Secretary, if memory serves me right, you said on CNN yesterday afternoon you expected Saddam Hussein to do something before the war. He apparently did not.
Well, I could not see what Saddam Hussein had to gain from a war. The offers that had been made by the United Nations, by France, and indirectly by the United States seemed to me to leave him in such a potentially strong position that I thought he would find some excuse to accept it. And I still, from a rational point of view, find it hard to understand why he didn't. But we have the satisfaction of knowing that the president agreed to really minimum conditions to prevent the war.
You are considered by many to be one of the quintessential diplomats. Do you think the last diplomatic avenues were all traveled down before those bombs were dropped last night?
I think the last avenues were traveled, plus 25%, because when you consider some of the proposals that were brought to Saddam Hussein, which would have led to the withdrawal of all Allied forces, left his forces intact, put Arab forces friendly to Iraq into Kuwait, plus subsequent negotiations on all issues, I believe that we have the satisfaction of knowing that the maximum had been offered in order to avoid the war.
Mr. Kissinger, knowing what you now know, what we all know about Operation Desert Storm, as it is being called now, how would you assess the value of what has been done so far toward its ultimate goal, which is to get Iraq out of Kuwait?
Oh, I think, first of all, that the President and the administration deserve the gratitude of the American people for the steadfastness with which they have conducted our policy. I think what is now, what this operation does, is this: I expect the Iraqi military forces to collapse within a measurable time, say up to 2 weeks. Then the United States has no interest in destroying Iraq as a country. Quite the contrary. We supported Iraq in a war of 8 years against Iran, and the territorial integrity of Iraq remains an American interest. And we should make sure that we do not generate a new aggressor in that area from the neighbors of Iraq by creating a total power vacuum. But what this operation will do is that the moderate Arab countries, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, even countries like Jordan, which, because of its geography, took an ambiguous position, now can, together with us, attempt to fashion a plan for solving other problems of the area in the Gulf, on the Palestinian issue, and that we can be doing this without having a gun at our head, held at our head by somebody who took 9,000 hostages. I think this is a tremendous benefit for the peace of the world, and I think that we have gained ourselves 5 years for constructive diplomacy in which those who were on the side of moderation and against the terrorists will now be able to shape the future of this crucial area. I think this is the major achievement of this operation, which I expect to end in a relatively brief period of time, 2 to 3 weeks.
The war is literally in Saddam Hussein's backyard now. Have you been surprised at the apparently limited counterattack so far, and what do you expect from him next?
Well, his behavior, of course, has been puzzling, and I thought all along that Iraqi offensive strength was vastly overrated, and I never thought that they could mount a strong counterattack. I hope that we can avoid, and we appear to be avoiding, a ground action that will involve a lot of casualties. But I think that unless Iraq has capabilities that no one ever conceived, I would expect that the military capacity of Iraq will be reduced, that at some point surrenders of the Iraqi army in Kuwait are going to begin, and that at that point the military operation can be wound up. I do not believe that Saddam Hussein has the capability for sustained resistance to the kind of operations that are now being conducted.
Mr. Secretary, thank you so very much for being with us this morning. Mr. Henry Kissinger, former U.S. Secretary of State. Molly?
CNN has just gotten word that there will be a U.S. military briefing in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. That's to happen in about 15 minutes, and of course we'll take you there live when it happens. Right now we're going to switch to London. We take you to the British Defense Ministry, where Tom King, British Defense Minister, is holding a briefing of his own. We'll listen in.
The Chief of Defense Staff to speak.
Thank you, Secretary of State. The Joint Commander, Air Chief Marshal Hine, has reported to me that the initial raids have gone well. Many of our tornadoes were involved in a series of attacks on Iraqi airfields and radars. The multinational air control is working very impressively. Our air commander in theater speaks of an air of quiet efficiency with timely information coming in from a whole variety of sensors. Very well coordinated Allied attacks have been made with large numbers, hundreds of combat aircraft and supporting tankers in the air at the same time. Many hundreds of night air-to-air refueling has taken place. RAF crews are very pleased with their aircraft. Their hard training, particularly in recent weeks, and the detailed planning and preparation for this eventuality has paid off. Raids are continuing today, and I anticipate will go on now at a continuing high rate. I have had no reports of Scud missile attacks, though I know that there have been some false alarms. Other Iraqi activity last night, as the Secretary of State has indicated, was low. They seem to have been caught by surprise, and no doubt the raids aimed at their command and control systems have made reaction very much more difficult for them. Our own combat air patrols over Saudi Arabia have reported no enemy contacts. Thank you.
We'll take questions then. Yes.
Can you pass that walk up to yourself?
It is inevitable that there will be a large number of civilian casualties.
No, all the efforts and the careful preparation to which Sir David Craig referred were directed very much to identify the key elements in the Iraqi military capability and to try and ensure a minimization of the risk of civilian casualties. And that is certainly the basis of the planning that was done, and on the information available to me so far, I think that is being achieved.
Mr. Davis, please. I put coming to the second and say, whether or not the tornado was brought down by enemy fire, or was it an engine fault?
We don't know. We know that it was an engine fire. It's a perfectly fair question to ask, because it may have been one not due to enemy action, or it may have been caused by enemy action.
What is over due weight or over into...
we're not talking about the actual sphere of operations or what targets it was involved in at this stage.
Marshal Evans. Would you care to say something about the skill and courage of the British pilots in this early stage of the operation?
I pay tribute to the, as Sir David did, to the tremendous preparation that they have done, and their spirit right through from the very start, of the way in which I was, this aircraft was from Muharraq, which I remember when those tornadoes arrived at Muharraq, and the way in which they accepted that challenge, not knowing at that stage what they might face, is exactly the same spirit that they've shown and which people on television have been able to see as they've returned from these missions. Their courage, their good sense, their sense of responsibility, I think, have come through very clearly indeed. I know the whole country will be proud of them.
Mr. King, Norman Rees of ITN. Are you surprised by the apparent lack of response of the Iraqi ground defences and their own aircraft?
Sir David Craig may like to add to this, but I would say straight away, and I said the story so far. This is very early days. We believe there is evidence that we have significantly damaged Iraq's military capability and in certain aspects of its air defenses. But it's far too early to be certain about that. They may well be conserving the resources that they have, and it may be worth not wishing to risk them in the initial stages. There are a number of possibilities that exist in this, and certainly I would say that it has been an encouraging start, that the missions have been accomplished with great skill and courage. We believe, on the initial evidence, that in the main the targets were hit and the objectives were achieved, but it is early, and we have yet to see whether the initial successes will be carried on. I think there was very easy for the public mood and your mood perhaps in presenting it to swing from one extreme to the other. And I would warn people against jumping to early conclusions. This is very early indeed in a very difficult challenge that we face against a country that possesses very considerable armaments, that possesses some very nasty weapons as well. And while we certainly are determined to be effective in carrying through this operation, I wouldn't want people to come to early conclusions on this matter.
President Bush has said that one objective is to take out Iraq's nuclear and chemical capabilities. Do you have any idea whether these facilities...
What you're looking at is a military briefing going on...
I'm not going to comment.
...at this hour at the British Defence Ministry in London. That was British Defence Minister Tom King. He, along with Marshal David Craik of the British Air Force, were briefing reporters in London on just what the status is of British forces who are taking part in the Allied attack on Iraq. We do expect a U.S. military briefing in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, set to begin in about 9 minutes from now, and of course CNN will take you there live. Rick?
Molly, we now have what we believe is the first response from an Iraqi official since the war began in Baghdad and other parts of Iraq overnight. It is the Iraqi ambassador to London who was interviewed by ITN.
Enemies attacked the civilian targets, although they claimed that they did not attack civilian targets. I have no details about the casualties. They should be very heavy.
Will the ferocity of the attack force Iraq to compromise?
Not at all. We believe in our cause and we will defend our cause.
We'll have more on what they're saying in Iraq, what they're saying in Baghdad, what they're saying in Washington. Stay with CNN.
Day after day, night after night, there's an easy way to save on AT&T long distance. And all it takes to get started is one simple phone call. Just call 1-800-874-4300 for the AT&T Reach Out America plan. Reach Out America gives you an additional 25% discount starting at 5 p.m. So you'll get the biggest discount during the best time to call. But that's just the beginning. The AT&T Reach Out America plan also gives you a 10% daytime discount. Great. Plus an hour of weekend and night calls, so you can call all across America for one low price.
Oh, my assistant just brought me a copy of the budget.
To order the AT&T Reach Out America plan, call 1-800-874-4300. You'll get a 25% discount off our already low prices from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. An hour of weekend and night calls, plus our daytime discount. It all adds up to savings 24 hours a day.
Hi, Grandma. Yes, I'm fine, and so is Harry.
And it costs just $8.70 a month. Order the AT&T Reach Out America plan now and see how easy it is to save on AT&T long distance 24 hours a day. To order, call 1-800-874-4300.
Ready?
Need another reason?
And call, Maria.
The plan also includes an international discount at no extra charge.
I'll be there tomorrow.
You can even get an option that lets you save on calls away from home. And it's so easy to order. Just call 1-800-874-4300. And save on quality AT&T long distance, day and night. AT&T, the right choice.
It is 27 minutes past the top of the hour. The lights at the White House in Washington, of course, have been on all night. Frank Sesno has been there watching. Frank, what's going on at this hour?
Well, right now, Rick, we expect that the President will be meeting shortly with his top advisors, among them Defense Secretary Cheney, Secretary of State Baker. We just saw a few moments ago Vice President Quayle go in here, reporting for work this morning. The President popped his head into the White House briefing room around 5:40 a.m. Eastern Time this morning to say that he was very pleased that things were going very well, although he provided no details on the military operation in the Persian Gulf. In addition to the consultations and updatings that the President is receiving from the Situation Room here, he's expected to meet with congressional leadership later in the morning, and top administration officials are expected to report to Capitol Hill to be briefing other lawmakers there throughout the course of the day. The situation, of course, in flux. The White House is cautious, not trying to be too overly optimistic, and watching very closely. I'm Frank Sesno, CNN, reporting live from the White House.
All right, thanks, Frank. We will be checking back with you shortly, of course. We're expecting in about 10 minutes a U.S. military briefing in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. We will be carrying that live here on CNN. Right now, at this hour in London, a British defense briefing is still underway. And we go back there with British Defense Secretary Tom King.
The point I made at the beginning, this is a continuing operation. This isn't, and I think some people think that we're reporting on events that have happened and have finished. As we sit here now, further sorties have been flown. But as far as I'm aware, as I speak, they have not yet been committed.
The initial sorties were mainly tornadoes on the British side, were they?
Hang on, yeah.
Well,
sorry,
the aeroplanes used in the initial British sorties were tornadoes.
GR1s.
And tanker aircraft, of course.
With the tanker refueling aircraft.
Mr. King, Brad McCartney, Daily Record, you said when you were asked about the land assault and the possibility that there had been surrender, that reports were coming through, you said to us, do you mean the same newspaper and wire reports that we're getting, or are you talking about, reports to the government from the forces?
We have had separate reports, but not through military channels.
Can you say which channels?
No. A lot is happening at the moment, and I'm very anxious not to give you anything that isn't absolutely right and that we're sure of. We've already had a number of completely bogus reports on a whole range of different matters, and therefore you'll understand why, the speed at which things are happening, I'm very anxious to keep my pledge with you to only give you information of which we're sure. We're not sure of that, but it is true that we have had those reports from a separate route, but there is considerable confusion with many things happening, and I would rather wait until we've had better confirmation on that. Yes, absolutely.
Are you surprised with the way how things have gone so far?
So far, it has been encouraging, but so far is the right word to use. Iraq remains very powerful. It has considerable military might. It has taken a very high degree of skill, courage, and determination to achieve what we believe will have been the significant results of the first hours of this operation. But I do wish to emphasize that there is still very considerable challenges to face. We shall continue to pursue them as effectively as we can, and Sir David has referred to the meticulous planning and the very good cooperation that has gone into getting us as far as we have, which I hope will stand us in good stead. But I would caution everybody against jumping to any conclusions at this stage as to how soon or how early an outcome and how satisfactory an outcome we would see.
So David mentioned that obviously GR1 were primarily active, but he also mentioned that caps were flown. Now, were they flown by other tornadoes? Or?
Yes, that's correct. Yes. Including other tornadoes. Both types of tornado were airborne during the last night.
Can I clarify, have you said that it's the GR1 variant which is missing?
Yes. Yes.
Can you give us some idea of how...
If I didn't say it, I mean, that is correct.
Can you give us some idea of how we actually take appliances and are they multiplied more than
No, I'd rather not go into operational matters about the length of a sortie or the number of sorties people fly at this stage, because that could give information which we'd rather not release to the opposition.
Anybody else? I'm not aware that he has this morning.
What's your Arab reaction to the events overnight?
Well, I've been more concerned with our elements and our contribution to these events. I'm not aware of specific Arab reaction from that perspective.
Mr. King, can you say whether...
Will you going to the WEU meeting in Paris, and what do you expect to come from that?
No, Mr. Hamilton, the Minister of the Armed Forces, has gone in my place.
What is the purpose of that meeting?
I would need to check. It is, of course, to coordinate and to keep European cooperation going in the defence field. To be honest, any specific items on the agenda, I haven't had a chance to look at.
Peter.
The Defence Secretary Tom King speaking at the Ministry of Defence.
That, of course, was British television telling me that you've been watching a military briefing at the British Defence Ministry talking about the status of British forces in the Gulf. I believe right now we're going to take you to Saudi Arabia. Is that true, to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, for a U.S. military briefing? Can I get confirmation that we are ready to go to Riyadh? That briefing, I'm told, is still pending. We will take you live there just as soon as it happens. Iraq's President Saddam Hussein braved the Allied bombing raids to tour the streets of Baghdad today. Mr. Hussein visited the badly damaged Air Force and Air Defense headquarters, and he was seen earlier at the headquarters of Iraqi TV. Apparently, President Hussein is still defiant. His message to the Iraqi people was broadcast during the night on Baghdad radio.
God is with us, dear brother. God is always the patient, the steadfast, and He will support them in any case. With the gravity of the conflict and the steadfastness of the believers, success will become possible, so that the whole nation will overthrow the thrones and the presidencies that have been traitors to it. These traitors will be overthrown after the defeat of the Satan in the White House, Bush. And in this poisonous hornet nest of confrontation, criminal Tel Aviv will also be beaten, and Palestine will be liberated, and its people will take their lands back. And the Golan Heights will be liberated, and the Arab individual will be liberated everywhere.
It is not known if Saddam Hussein's address was recorded earlier or was broadcast live on Baghdad radio. We have this word just in to CNN. Defense Secretary Dick Cheney has confirmed to CNN that the United States has lost one plane in the attack on Iraqi targets. According to some sources, this information, according to my producer, is coming from Georgia Senator Sam Nunn to CNN. We are being told, though, that through Senator Nunn, it is being confirmed that Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney is saying that indeed one United States plane has been downed in the attack on Iraq. Stay with us. We'll have more details of that story and all the news. Stay with us.
Your weight is up, your energy's down, your self-esteem's low, your blood pressure's high. You know what you need? Exercise. But who has the time? You do. Just imagine what a difference you can make in just 20 minutes a day, 3 times a week with NordicTrack. NordicTrack. They call it the world's best aerobic exercise. NordicTrack's patented flywheel provides smooth, non-jarring continuity of motion, so there's no stress to your back or knees. Your total body gets into the action. That's not true with ordinary exercisers. NordicTrack's total body workout burns more calories. You'll lose weight, reduce stress, and feel better. I'll bet you never imagined fitness at home could be this easy. Now is the time to get rid of that unfit body. Create a new you. Try NordicTrack for 30 days at home with no risk or obligation.
You'll see and feel the difference.
Call for a free video and brochure.
This is CNN.
We are, as we've been saying, awaiting that very important U.S. military briefing that will take place shortly in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. We will go there just as soon as it begins. Right now, we're going to take this opportunity to talk to Robert McFarlane. He's a former national security advisor to President Ronald Reagan. He joins us in our Washington studio this morning. Mr. McFarlane saw action as a Marine in Vietnam. He is the son of a Navy pilot and now in the Persian Gulf, so he has a very personal interest in what's going on there. Secretary McFarlane, can you boil down for us just exactly what's happened so far in your view and how far we have yet to go with this air bombardment?
Well, the military objective first was to put out their eyes, their radars, and ability to see us, and that has gone extremely well. We also wanted to destroy their offensive military power, foremostly air, and all those aircraft that we didn't destroy, we've cratered the runways so they can't get off. So the first phase of battle has gone extremely well. Looks to me like today, if there is an ability to react, we would see it fairly early on, either a missile getting through or an aircraft or two, but we've been extremely successful, it appears, so far.
We do apparently have some confirmation from Defense Secretary Dick Cheney that the U.S. Did indeed lose one plane in the assault. Are you surprised that the losses were not greater?
Yes, it's a real tribute to the excellence of the Allied military power and their tactics that we didn't suffer more losses than that, and truly an astonishing, successful raid.
You know as well as anybody about this kind of thing. Do you expect, or what kind of response do you expect from Iraq after last night's bombing raid? Nobody really seems to know.
Well, it was clear going into the last days of the diplomatic struggle that Saddam just had no understanding of the scale of violence that he faced. No rational person that understood what was about to occur could have behaved as he did. Now that it has happened, it seems to me that we are going to see one of two things very quickly within probably a week's time. On the one hand, either the shattering effect will lead to an uprising within his own country and force a change and push him out, or he himself will see that there is simply no way of retrieving any gain from this. What he anticipated would happen would be a groundswell of grassroots Arab support, the peasant, average person in the street from Morocco to Oman. It's going to be interesting to see if that really happens too. A massive anti-U.S. sentiment seems to me unlikely.
Do you know if your son, who is a Navy pilot, took part in the raids last night and today?
I don't know that. There are 6 carriers there, and he's on one of them. Looks to me like the burden of the first strike was focused upon Air Force aircraft, and that they did an extremely good job.
What kind of damage do you believe that Allied forces are able to do at this point in Kuwait? We're talking about mainly ground forces there.
Well, first of all, I think President Bush emphasized that we have no quarrel with the Iraqi people, and for that matter, it even includes the Iraqi soldier. We would like to destroy the military capability, the weapons, the artillery, the aircraft, the tanks, and so forth, the air defense systems, radars, and missiles. And so that will be the foremost priority in the next days here. We'd like to avoid human loss to the extent possible and make clear to the Iraqi people and to the Iraqi military that it's our fight is with Saddam. It's not with anyone else.
Are you, Mr. McFarlane, one of those who foresees any sort of an extended ground war going on between the thousands of forces put out in this region?
Well, we'd like to avoid that, and I think President Bush will not do that at all unless there is absolutely no other recourse. At this point, with the first day's success, it would seem as if the coercive potential, the persuasion that is being put on Saddam by this massive air destruction will enable us to avoid a ground engagement. To imagine that the Iraqis would attack offensively would be very unwise on their part. But I would not anticipate that in the next few days there would be any need for a ground action by the U.S.
All right. Former National Security Advisor Robert McFarland, thank you very much for sharing your views on CNN with us today. Rick?
Molly, we are still awaiting the beginning of that U.S. military briefing in Saudi Arabia. When that occurs, we will be going to it live. Right now, we'd like to take a break, and as we go into this break, look with us at newspaper headlines across this nation this morning. Here's what the press is having to say about the war that started just hours ago. We're looking at planes instead of newspapers. This is... And now, the Washington Post headline, U.S. allies launch massive attack against targets in Iraq and Kuwait. The headline in the Atlanta Constitution, very large type, U.S. attacks. The liberation of Kuwait has begun. In the New York Times, U.S. and allies open air war on Iraq, bomb Baghdad and Kuwaiti targets. No choice but force, Bush declares. And the New York Post, reminiscent of a World War II headline, war.
Those who think only short term may take a bearish view of the times ahead. But those with a long-term perspective will see the future as a whole different animal. At Merrill Lynch, our insight and understanding can lead you to the opportunities that lie ahead. Merrill Lynch, we're bullish on the future.
It seems that every time you turn around these days, another pain reliever with ibuprofen in it is comparing itself to Tylenol. But you know what they can't say? They can't say they're gentler than Tylenol, because they're not. Tylenol won't irritate your stomach, the way ibuprofen sometimes can. That's a medical fact. And is it any wonder that today hospitals use Tylenol 14 times more than ibuprofen? Tylenol, the pain reliever hospitals use most.
In American business, there is an award bestowed each year upon a select group of companies. Among the 10 recipients this year, AT&T. The award? The San Francisco Examiner's Golden Turkey for the worst advertising of 1990. We at MCI are glad to have this opportunity to give wider publicity for this award.
Advantages. We both have Schwab accounts, but I've got the edge. We both have Schwab One, the brokerage account with free checking. Both save on commissions, and both earn income between investments. My old broker charged $80 for an account with checking. At Schwab, we pay zip. But I've still got Jack beat, because I can find my Schwab Fund checkbook.
For a free Schwab Fact Kit, call toll-free 800-257-1257.
Our war in the Gulf coverage continues now. As we reported just a few minutes ago, CNN has gotten confirmation of one U.S. plane down in the war. Gene Randall is at the Pentagon with details. Gene?
Rick, we don't know a lot. We know that one warplane has been confirmed by the Pentagon. No word on the fate of the pilot or the crew. This fits with an earlier report we had this morning that there were probable U.S. coalition losses in the air war. The British have apparently lost a fighter plane, a Tornado, with a two-man crew aboard. 4 French aircraft were hit by Iraqi ground fire, but reportedly got away safely. At 9 this morning, Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney and his Joint Chiefs Chairman, General Colin Powell, will be in this room to answer questions. Some of those questions certainly will be about casualties. Gene Randall, CNN Live at the Pentagon.
Thank you, Gene. We're going to switch you live now to Jerusalem. CNN's Linda Scherzer is standing by there. Linda?
Molly, the outcome of today's bombing raids on Iraq came as a major blow to the Palestinians here. First to the people who were still hoping that a war could be averted, and also to those Palestinians who were still placing their bets and putting their faith in Saddam Hussein. Of course, the Palestinians have been avid supporters of Saddam Hussein. In recent weeks, the Iraqi leader has been loudly championing the cause of the Palestinian people. He even reportedly offered to consider withdrawing his forces from Kuwait in exchange for an Israeli withdrawal of their troops from the West Bank and Gaza Strip. That option, it seems, however remote, is now non-existent. And for the Palestinian people, it comes as a major disappointment.
The mood was a somber one in the Palestinian communities of East Jerusalem and the occupied territories. The man they had hailed as their new hero had just taken a beating, and many are worried that Palestinians will suffer for it.
Most of the people here are feeling, sad, I'm sure. All the people.
Like the Israelis, Palestinians were told to stay inside their homes once the war began. Only the Palestinians had no choice. Most of the occupied territories and parts of East Jerusalem were placed under curfew to prevent rioting. There were reports of demonstrations in East Jerusalem, at least one where Palestinians wore their army-issued gas masks. Meanwhile, Palestinian leaders worry that if Iraq is defeated, the chances of a solution for the Palestinian problem will go down with it.
It will consecrate the language of violence, and it will undermine the language of conciliation.
You know that we are hoping and trying to avoid such an attack, such a war, and to reach to a political solution within the framework of the international legitimacy.
This is Linda Scherzer reporting live from Jerusalem.
All right, thank you, Linda. We have been reporting throughout the morning that we would be going to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia for a U.S. military briefing. That briefing is now underway. We join it live.
Strike Eagles, F-16 Fighting Falcons, F-4G Wild Weasels, A-10 Thunderbolts, F-111s, F-117 Stealth Fighters, and B-52s. Naval and Marine aircraft included F-18 Hornets, AV-8 Harriers, A-7s, and A-6s. Additionally, United States Army AH-64 Apache attack helicopters also took part in the operation. These aircraft delivered both guided and unguided munitions. Also, Navy ships launched conventional Tomahawk cruise missiles during the entire operation. Although we can't discuss specifics on either targeting or mission results, our first indications are very encouraging. Command and control for the operation was provided by AWACS aircraft, the E-3A Sentry and the E-2C Hawkeye. Protecting all coalition aircraft from Iraqi interceptors were U.S. Air Force F-15 Eagles, U.S. Navy F-14 Tomahawks, and U.S. Marine F-18 Hornets. These aircraft provided air cover during all phases of this operation, including escort into and out of the target area. Additionally, Air Force EF-111s and Navy EA-6s provided electronic combat support. Supporting this massive effort were air refueling aircraft that included Air Force KC-10s and KC-135s, Navy A-6s, and air refueling aircraft from the French Air Force. French Jaguar fighter bomber aircraft also participated in operations on day one. As we stated earlier, Iraqi response has been limited, and we have received no reports of Iraqi Scud missile launches. However, the U.S. Embassy strongly urges all American citizens in Saudi Arabia to remain at home or place of work until the situation clarifies. The American Embassy is open 24 hours a day and is closely monitoring the situation. I would like to reiterate the goals of the President for this campaign. They are to have Iraq leave Kuwait and comply with all associated UN resolutions, to restore the legitimate government of Kuwait, and to restore peace and stability in the region. In closing this announcement, I'd like to provide you with a portion of the text from the message that General Schwarzkopf used when he announced this operation to all soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines of the U.S. Central Command. He stated, "The President